Hey, this is Joshua with Cultural Catholic coming at you with a single story today, but it's a pretty big one. And so basically, this is a story about something happening to our troops in Syria. And yes, we have soldiers in Syria, and not just special forces operators, but regular soldiers, you know, guys that we'd normally send to Iraq or Afghanistan during the height of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars to basically patrol and keep the peace. So, the CNN article posted yesterday, posted yesterday, explains that U.S. troops in northern Syria came under a direct attack last week by Turkish-backed rebels. A military official with the coalition fighting ISIS Daesh told CNN Tuesday. The official said that while U.S. troops returned fire, there were no casualties on either side. The coalition believes the attackers are part of the Turkish-backed opposition forces, a loose grouping of Arab and Turkmen fighters that have helped the Turkish military clear ISIS from the Turkish-Syria border area. So, little bit of background: Syrian civil war started. A lot of different armed groups started to pop up. Some of them backed by the Gulf states, some of them backed by Turkey, um, and some of them backed by the United States. Only the United States largely became involved with backing rebel groups when Daesh, ISIS, came onto the scene, and those were meant to exclusively fight extremist forces. However, most of the groups that we back now are actually extremist forces. Anyways, um, and so another group that we like to back are the Kurds. Now, the Kurds are not an extremist group, they're an ethnic group that live in Turkey, Syria, Iran, and Iraq. They actually have an autonomous zone in Iraq, and the Kurds in Iran actually have some level of autonomy, but not the same amount as Iraq does. Syria, they were basically living on the same level as Iraq, Syrian Arabs and other ethnic groups there. However, in Turkey, Kurds are viewed as second-class citizens. They aren't treated well. There's actually a massive insurgency for a long time that died down for a bit, but now that Erdogan is in charge, it's kind of spiked quite a bit. Although this insurgency seems to attempt to target police and military exclusively, while the PKK, while other insurgent groups would typically be indiscriminate, as we've seen in the past. Anyways, and the Turks and Turkey isn't very happy that the U.S. has sided with the Kurds, even though the Kurds are the most effective fighting force in Syria against Daesh, as well as in Iraq against Daesh. Actually, when Daesh first stormed into Iraq and beat back the Iraqi military without even breaking a sweat, I advocated of course, this would be in private. I didn't really keep this YouTube channel up to date back then. I would have suggested maybe having the Kurdish Peshmerga fighting on the ground. Um, our aircraft, in conjunction with Iraqi air forces, flying in the air with Iranian Quds forces, coordinating between the two, because in Iraq we were on the same side. In Syria, we're not so much on the same side as Iran, but anyways, I digress. Um, and so Turkish-backed forces along the border area have actually been attacking American forces in the area that are there. And this, granted, it's a little old, but this NBC News article from May actually explains the issue quite effectively. Now, part of the title is cropped out, but what it's saying is the U.S. has started sending weapons to Syrian Kurds, official says, and they're viewed as a potential important part of the push to take Raqqa, which is the de facto capital of Daesh in Syria. And again, the Turks are not too keen on this because they view the Kurds as a threat to their power. Um, and I mean, I get it. They're an effective fighting force, but they've only been fighting as long as they have to get civil and equal rights. And if and barring that, and on top of that, maybe their own country, which they kind of deserve for the way they've been treated. So these forces have, as CNN points out, many of these Turkey-supported forces originated as part of the opposition to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, and they have also clashed with U.S.-backed and Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces in a struggle for influence in the region. While Turkey has in the past backed these fighters with tanks, airstrikes, and special forces, the coalition official made it clear that Turkish soldiers were not involved in the recent attacks on U.S. personnel. So, like I said, when the Syrian civil war broke out, there were a plethora of armed groups, each with their own aim. Kurds for getting their own autonomous region, Turkmen to rejoin Turkey, and then there were a lot of groups that wanted to have their own, to have representation in the government, particularly Sunni. And actually, to get a little bit of background on the Kurds, I'm going to also include, granted it's a little old, a BBC fact sheet on the, CNN fact sheet on the Kurds, which I think is very important. And the Turkish-backed forces, like I said, got a lot of support. And the fact that Turkish soldiers were not part of these attacks is important because Turkey is a NATO ally, and they're the second largest army in NATO. So hypothetically, if Turkish soldiers were to attack U.S. soldiers, that would be a big breach of NATO. And that could have huge dire consequences for Turkey because I'm not sure if attack on soldiers counts for Article 14, but if member states are attacked, it's basically all member states are attacked and are obligated to participate in any conflict starting with that state. It's actually back in 2008 when Georgia was attacked by Russia. If they had been a member of NATO, the United States would have been obligated, as well as every other NATO nation, to attack Russia. So that's a very important thing that we need to think about when looking at this. So you may be wondering, why are U.S. forces there? The CNN article explains that U.S. forces have been in northern Syria for months, where they are performing a de facto peacekeeping role in an effort to prevent clashes between various armed groups in the region. While Pentagon spokesman U.S. Navy Captain Jeff Davis declined to call the troops peacekeepers upon their initial deployment in March, he referred to them as a visible reminder of anybody looking to start a fight, and continues. Dillon said at the time that the attacking forces were most likely aware that they were firing on U.S. troops. These patrols are overt. Our forces are clearly marked, and we have been operating in the area for some time. Dillon said, adding, it should not be news to anyone that we are doing this, operating in that particular area. U.S. troops have been performing overt patrols in the area since March, often flying the American flag from armored vehicles in a bid to deter forces in the region from attacking one another and undermining the fight against Daesh. So actually, up until probably early this year, a lot of people in the American public probably weren't aware, and probably still aren't aware, that U.S. forces are in Syria. They're also in Jordan, and I mean, we're also already aware that they're in Iraq. But the fact that they're in Syria trying to keep people who clearly don't like each other to not fight each other but to fight Daesh. I think it's a fool's errand. Um, I think a lot of progressives and not so much isolationists but non-interventionists are right in saying that we should leave the region, not give Daesh the opportunity to use us as propaganda, and have local forces deal with it on their own. Now, if we want to send humanitarian aid, humanitarian assistance, that's fine. And if something like the Yazidis happens again, getting involved, that's fine. But I think it should not be the U.S. unilaterally. We are not the policemen of the world. We should not be. And frankly, more and more Americans are getting sick of fighting abroad. Um, but yeah, this is kind of a scary development. And I don't think a lot of people in corporate media are really talking about this, and we really need to be more aware of this so that we know what our taxpayer money is going towards. Not only are they going towards, uh, frankly, the better group of rebels, but also towards maintaining a presence in a war zone that we have no right or business being in. So yeah, this is Joshua with Cultural Catholic signing off.